Scouser.
Our match of the week this week was Manchester United against Liverpool. We definitely don't do a good job of hiding it, even if we tried, especially you and me, Gally, that we're Liverpool fans on the show, and it's a Liverpool fan channel overall. So definitely did not go the way we wanted. It was kind of like an interesting matchup, and the build up for it, I almost feel like took it a totally different direction and not a good direction as far as Liverpool is concerned in terms of like talking points with Keita and transfers, while United trying to kind of appease the fans a bit more with Casemiro and other stuff. And there was a lot of talk about the protests before against Glazers and all that. But I feel like those two talking points as the game was building up was kind of building against Liverpool, and they kind of showed it with coming with came out with almost no energy at all. It made the Fulham game look like a lot better performance.
Yeah, we'll get to the play on the pitch. So let's start with the talking points pre-match between the Glazers' protest by the Manchester United supporters and the Keita talk, the transfer rumblings. I don't even know what to make of it yet, because I don't believe that they're selling Naby Keita, and I don't believe that, a report came out 72 hours ago that Naby Keita was considering this Monday as a pinnacle moment in his Liverpool career, and then he doesn't make the match day squad, which basically sums up Naby Keita's Liverpool career, if it's true that he picked up some type of niggling injury a day before the match that he was supposed to start. Because it looked to me like on the pitch that they weren't prepared for the plan. And that's never the way that our side is. We may not execute the plan, but it always looks like they understand what their job is and they are out there trying to do it. Whether it works or not, whether it gels, that's always questionable, right? But it always looks like they're prepared. And today it didn't look like they were prepared to see that type of United side. I think we'll get to the United lineup and, some of the things Ten Hag did well. I mean, he made some big calls. It was a gutsy move to bench Ronaldo. I think that has to be mentioned, and he needs some credit for that. But sticking on Liverpool to start, the better side came out and allowed a team that needed a reason to fight. It gave it to them in the first 5 minutes of the match. They won every 50-50 ball. It seemed like they were first to everything. They allowed the Old Trafford faithful to get behind them. And it, I know the announcers always want to paint the picture that Old Trafford and Manchester United are back whenever they can, because that's good for TV. But if I was being a fair neutral, that did sound like the old Manchester United. Supporters on the edge of their seat, rooting on good play, rooting on hard work and effort. And even that first goal was a classic United goal.
We were recording this a few hours after the final whistle. So more will come out on this, especially like the Keita issue, because I think that's the part that brings the question in my head. Because, I talked about it in our shows before. This is an ideal game for Keita in terms of his pressing and stuff like that. So was he really injured? Is he going to be moved? Was there some other kind of drama? Because it almost felt like everybody on that field for Liverpool today was not mentally there 100%. And, we talk about when they win, when they come back, get the last minute goals, we talk about mentality monsters. So you got to kind of own up to it when you see them again this season becoming overpowered, almost looks like, by the opponents. And that's why, they're always second to everything. They're always like half a second late. Every pass is a little short or a little too long. And, it just did not look there. Van Dijk has probably looked his worst since becoming a Liverpool player. And yeah, it just looks like the spine of that team is not what it used to be, which is what makes everything else tick. Today, they just looked like they were running out of ideas at certain points. And even those little glimpses you got where I felt like towards the end of the first half, where they were like, kind of like, okay, here it comes. We're trying to build it again. It looked like they were too fragile, where a short pass, and then it kind of like that momentum they were building would just totally disappear because it was almost like a fake momentum, probably created thanks to United in the first place.
Yeah, I think the idea of the you mentioned of the spine being just kind of weakened, and I think it's been glaring this season. Whether it's been Virgil at the center of the defense, Fabinho has not looked himself playing in the holding defensive role. When he's subbed off, Henderson is not covering himself in glory, in my opinion, as well. I thought he had a shocker of a match today. Um, you could argue Henderson, Van Dijk, and Bobby all struggled today to put their own imprint on the match. And I think we've seen that even in over the three matches, if you were to rank all three players as a whole, each one of them, I think, would raise their hand and say, we haven't done enough to our levels of what this side needs from us. And I think it's so important for the players around them, whether it's Bobby or whether it's Mo and Diaz off of Bobby, whether it's Elliott from Henderson's work rate and endeavor and leadership, and of course what Van Dijk does for the back line. And when Van Dijk is not confident, the entire back line is in shambles. We've talked a lot about Robbo this year. We've talked a lot about Trent. Even Matip and Gomez looking a knockoff, and it's too bad that Konate couldn't build on kind of fine form he finished last year. But if Virgil looks human, this high line, this whole back defensive setup that we have doesn't work. And unfortunately, he's looked less than human, Timucin. He
Yes.
hasn't looked up to it. I'd argue Gomez was head and shoulders better than him today. And one guy hasn't started in almost 2 years in the Premier League. And the other guy's Virgil van Dijk.
And that's not to say Gomez had a good game, but I know exactly what you're saying. Looked better. But here's the thing, and I don't know, I think we've assumed as Liverpool fans, and obviously we've seen it. It's just not assumed. I mean, it was initially especially visible on the field that Van Dijk makes whoever his partner better. But even last season, as we watched that team on our podcast on Monday nights, we kept talking about how Matip was the better center back. I think if you look at game by game, like last season, and if you picked, like kind of like you did today, you said Gomez played better than Van Dijk, right? As a center back pairing. I think if you looked at it game by game, last year, you would probably pick Matip more often than Van Dijk in terms of the player who performed and played better that day. So maybe Matip was making Van Dijk look better last year. And without the second part being there, because Gomez still needs a direction, like you're saying, being out of action for so long. And it's very frustrating to see. At one point, I get that. And let's hope we don't go there. It's probably a bit extreme, but it was almost like watching Gerrard when he was playing for LA Galaxy over here. It's just like, man, it's like a shell of yourself, just not right. Always getting caught flat-footed. Like Van Dijk was just not himself. But I mean, honestly, obviously, we're going to be very critical of Liverpool because it was way below their standard. But I mean, you do have to give some credit to United in terms of the energy level they brought. I agree with what you're saying in the long run. We'll talk about this at the end, what it means for both teams. But you mentioned Ronaldo being benched. I thought the biggest call, which hurt Liverpool, was the benching of Maguire. Because I think that signals more of because he's done the benching Ronaldo on his way out thing. I think the team kind of knew that, but I almost feel like the benching of Maguire signals a true change to the rest of the team, just because he seemed to be untouchable before.
Yeah, and that's a fair shout. I like to make fun of good old Slabhead like the rest of Liverpool supporters. At the same time, I think he takes an unfair level of shtick. I think there have been a lot of really poor performances so far in the first, 2 game weeks for Manchester United. And I think benching Ronaldo against Liverpool at home is still a bigger shout than even sitting your captain when that captain is Harry Maguire. And if Varane came in and played great, I thought Varane was terrible today. Varane could have been sent off because there were a couple opportunities. He could have got yellows. I thought that Diaz should have attacked Varane more. I think Varane's a step slow. I he looked to me like a guy who was falling off at the end of his Real Madrid days. And I think that's why they allowed him to move on the way that they did. So I guess I can see the Maguire shout. I think it's a big call. I just still sitting down CR7 and having him staring out at the pitch to start the match was great. Not talking to any teammates and just basically staring straight ahead for the entire time. Um, where I would say they deserve a lot of credit is that he was able to get Alanga on the pitch. The energy was there. He attacked Trent early on. He was just causing him fits. You could tell he wanted no part of him. Trent picks up the stupid yellow card against Rashford, which kind of set off his whole day. And that's where I still think, I think Trent did a poor job closing down Alanga. That led to the opportunity for Sancho's first goal. What Van Dijk is doing there by not closing down the space and just kind of ball watching and letting Sancho just put Milner down and then slot home. Someone's going to have to explain to me there, because that just looked like that was like schoolboy Sunday morning pub league stuff. Like what a guy who's too hungover does on Sunday morning when he can't pop out and help out his, 55-year-old defensive
Yeah.
midfielder, not the
I will be Milner
37-year-old.
on Sunday, diving around trying to make things happen. And the young kid, I'm like, dude, step up to the ball. Like, because I think Milner did the job by holding that
Correct.
shot and bought that second, but nobody took advantage of that second that Milner bought. Hence, I think the big argument they had afterwards.
Yeah, and obviously, the second goal, it looked offsides in real time. I guess on the super slow-mo, you can kind of see that he's just barely onside there. But again, if we're waiting for VAR to save us from giving up, second goals in succession when we're already down 1-0 and we have 70 to 30% possession numbers, like shame on us. Like shame on us, shame on Trent for raising his hand. Van Dijk was out of sorts the entire second half for me. He was poor on that play in the first half, and he was even worse with his overall play in the second half. So, it just seemed like he just wasn't at the races, and nobody was. And, to be honest, 2-1 flatters us, in my opinion. If we had gotten a point out of this match, it would have been more highway robbery. We were that
Yeah,
poor.
that's probably fair. Even as it's hard to say as a Liverpool fan, but I don't think we did enough. And that's why it was aggravating watching those last 10, 15 minutes. One, you could see clearly that when Liverpool put the pressure on United backline, they were hurting and there were openings everywhere. Because you have like Ericsson and Fernandez and people like that on the floor. Yeah, they like to, dive around and block a shot and stuff like that, for fans' sake. But their positioning wise and defensive minded wise, it's not going to be there. I think going back to what you were talking about with like Maguire and Varane, I think, while Varane does not have the speed that he used to have, I think it's a guy with his experience plays within that speed and kind of like adjusts his positioning, which
Fair.
enables the people in front of him not to have to hold his hand all the time. Whereas I think with Maguire, you're kind of locking in your defensive mids to kind of like slide over that way to cover for him. Because I feel like he plays like he is got Gomez speed or Van Dijk speed, and he does not. So I think that's like the difference there. I felt, I would have rather, and I'm sure you would have rather seen Maguire out there,
Yeah,
just
of
knowing
course.
not only because of like what he brings, I think the whole like the fragile look that he brings. It's almost like having a bad goalkeeper behind you. You can be the same defensive line, but when the guy behind you is weak, it affects the entire defensive line. So I think it's similar when you have a center back behind you that is shaky and it's like, due for a mistake. It affects you as a midfielder, how you do things. It affects you as a forward, how you do things. And they didn't have that. So looking ahead, how do you think this affects both teams? Let's start with United. Because like I say, I think watching the end of the game showed to me that, if they play a team like, let's say, Brighton or Palace, who really go at them, I think they're still going to have a lot of issues back there.
Yeah, they need to shore up more of their problems. I mean, Delot is not the answer at right back. I think the young left back actually had a nice match today for such a big moment to have his first start for United, the
Yeah.
Malaysia kid. He played pretty well. You can see the talent there. They need a lot of players, man. They need to sign. I mean, Casemiro's going to make them better. He's old, and I think he's a step slower than they really want it in De Jong. But he's going to make them better, and he's going to make their center backs better the way he makes the Real Madrid center backs better, sitting in front of them and doing a job. I, you know, the biggest upset, the biggest thing as a Liverpool supporter that frustrated me today is I felt like with poor tactics and really no drive and effort, we gave them hope. Because I think we could have played poorly today and won 3-1, honestly.
Yeah.
And I do think that we saw today what these injuries are doing to us, though. I mean, Harvey Elliott has all the talent in his boots. He's not there yet to start a big match at Old Trafford and be the guy to unlock a big defense. And I love the kid, but it's just too much too soon, you know? And I think when you have literally the two Fabs to come off the bench, when you have five subs and all you can go to is a defensive holding midfielder and a 21-year-old kid you just picked up from the championship, you're beyond injury. You're not deep enough. So I think Liverpool's squad overall, with the injuries and its age and its current state, is being a little bit exposed. And I think that's scary that that's happening 3 weeks into the season. So for us, I think Peter Drury said at the end of the match, if Manchester United last week was in crisis, what is Liverpool now? And it can't be crisis when you were in the Champions League final, won 2 trophies, and almost won the league by a goal. But we got 2 points from 9 possible. And we just basically breathed life into our biggest rivals and made them believe they could be something better than they are. And those aren't things that add up for a team on the up. So I think we're at a crossroads. I'm not going to say a crisis, but Liverpool right now, their next 4 matches, they kind of got to they got to hit the ground and go on win 3, 4, 5 on a bounce if they're going to want to be able to have the type of season that they plan to have. So I think for Liverpool, we're at a crossroads. I think for United, all they can do is wake up tomorrow and say, our season just started. They beat Liverpool at home.
Yeah.
That's if you had told them they get 1 win out of their first 3 and they would have asked you, is it Liverpool at home? And if they said yes, as well as I do, they would have taken it, especially if they knew they were going to be ahead of us in the table when they went to bed tonight.
I think one thing going for United to build up on this is probably their fixture, but they're playing Southampton away, then Leicester City away. Both winnable games. Leicester City, I feel, could be a bit more scarier because it's a team that can go at them, but then they leak goals left and right. So at the same time, they can't defend anybody. I think we're going to find out what they're about when they go into the next fixture, when they play Arsenal and then go to Crystal Palace. That's going to be the defining moment for them. They go to a rough stretch there with Arsenal, Palace, Leeds, then they play City. So those 4 games will determine, I think, their season. I think it's kind of shocking to see Liverpool below United in the standings, and both being in abysmal rates, one with 3 points, one with 2 points out of a possible 9. I mean, playing Bournemouth home could be a blessing to come back from that, but I think what's been disappointing is you can have poor results, but I think I'm just very disappointed and more concerned about some of the body language and some of the consistency in poor performances. Because I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast. We were probably lucky to get a point from the Fulham game. That could have been, that could have easily been another loss. So that's what maybe concerns me the most is the body language I see, the ongoing issues. Van Dijk can have a poor game. Anybody can. Apparently, he is human, but consistently being poor, and it really depends on when these injured guys are going to start trickling in. But it's going to be an interesting 3 weeks for both games. For match of the week, I think it was a very defining moment for both teams in that sense. I don't know if the gameplay was as exciting to a neutral. It's kind of hard for us to gauge, I think, because any game is going to be, we're going to be into it because Liverpool is in it. But definitely kind of like brought up even more questions than we had probably before the game. But that was our match of the week. And sadly, it wasn't one that Liverpool won. Stud of the week for game day 3. Who do you have, Gally?
I went with, and this is not a player that I overly fancy, though he is fun to watch, and I think I see him more as a FIFA talent than the player. But I went for the effervescent and exciting Alan Saint Maximum.
Oh, yeah, he is a FIFA machine, like a button mashing player. Yes.
I feel like his FIFA skills surpass even his like highlight reel skills. Like his YouTube game is much better than his actual game. But he's good, but he is a great player, and I think there's probably a player inside there that will move up to a bigger club someday, and he might settle in and be an even better player, or he might go to a bigger club and be Wilf Zaha and realize that you're just another great player on a team of great players. And if you're not the best player, they don't let you dance on the ball and step over it 150 times and do all the little iterations that you do to make your highlight reels and your YouTube videos. So, but he went out there. He basically gave Kyle Walker fits. I mean, seriously, he basically ran Kyle Walker up and down the cul-de-sac. And it's not easy to put pressure on Kyle Walker. If there's one thing Kyle Walker normally is comfortable with, is that his pace will get him out of trouble. Yeah. And you could tell he knew from jump he was already beaten before the ball was kicked to start that match. And I think you saw it. I mean, he had all 3 assists. He created everything great that Newcastle was doing. Hard on Newcastle to only get 1 point in that match. They honestly deserve 3 because they took it to City, and he was a big, big reason. So for that, my stud of the week is Alan Saint Maximum.
Yes, he definitely had like an awesome week, and he is fun to watch. I always wonder we should get like a Newcastle fan on to tell us if it does get frustrating after a while, because sometimes he almost like tries to do too much. But I think, and it was somebody I was going to pick actually for start of the week. I considered Zaha because he can be that player, but it can also be frustratingly, I don't want to say selfish, not in terms of not passing, but sometimes just putting the head down a bit too much. I think in a team like Newcastle, like you're saying, what he did, you can almost like do that because you can say it's all on my shoulders. But when you go to a bigger team, like you said, we found out with Zaha, it's not always like the same ordeal. So I did consider Zaha, but I'm going with Arsenal, and kind of a cautious stud of the week in some ways. But I mean, they definitely played like the stud of the week. I mean, literally made Bournemouth invisible on the field. I think time will tell if that's Arsenal's doing, or partial credit should go to Bournemouth or not. But we talked about this with like Liverpool going to Fulham and like Nottingham Forest game last week at home. Like these teams that just come up to the Premier League and play their home games. It's like a lot more crazier environments and atmosphere, and they basically quieted the crowd with their play. They had constant possession, smart possession, some great performances, and it's pretty impressive. Only team with 9 points. I know their schedule is more favorable maybe on paper, but you got to get the 3 points one way or another, and they have been getting them, and they have been getting them in class. They've had, when you look back now, especially moving forward, that away win against Crystal Palace is probably huge, seeing how well Crystal Palace can play. So they have been quite impressive, and this game they definitely were something to watch and made me say, they could be for real. But I think we need to see a bigger test before I can definitely jump on board with it. But definitely for this week, they were my stud of the week. Next up, we have the dud of the week. Gally, who's the dud?
So I could easily throw Aston Villa out there because I think Villa's basically almost tried to been the dud of the week every single week, from losing to what is a championship side in Bournemouth to almost giving Everton a chance to draw from 2 up in stoppage time. And then, of course, just the absolute capitulation last week. But for me, it's pretty hard to look past West Ham. I mean, this is a club that got to a Europa League semifinal last year, really felt like they were in a shout for the Champions League spots. Thought they had one of the better offseason and windows that any side outside of maybe City had in all of the Premier League. And to be 0-3, 0 points, 0 goals scored. That's a tough, tough spot to be in. 2 of those losses happening at home. And, Brighton is playing great, and I think they deserve a lot of credit. And we should devote some time on one of these shows to talking about the sides that are really impressing us so far early in the season. And I think Brighton would be at the top of that list for me if it was just my eye told me what was improved from last season. But West Ham, they didn't lose that much. Antonio looks just a completely different player. I don't know how much longer Moyes can start Antonio through the center with him just running aimlessly and looking lost. They look better almost in every match as soon as they institute the 6'5" Italian striker. I know it's crazy, right? Have guys who can cross, put in a target man who can knock it down. It's just a novel concept. I know Moyes is very, very loyal. But I think he's got a couple big calls to make. I think he's got to think about replacing Fabianski with Areola. I think the kid is why they bought him. He's a young French keeper. I think he might be a better option for them. And I think he's got to seriously, seriously think about even the Souček Rice 2-man double pivot, because it's not working right now. And if Souček isn't knocking in dead headers from inside the 6-yard box and Declan Rice isn't offering you the leadership and drive, you have to replace them with players who are, and they have some alternate options, and it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. But I think West Ham's in some trouble, because what we've seen is West Ham supporters, they can turn quick on that side and that team. And I hope it doesn't happen, but I think they're by far my dud of the week.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I almost actually went with Villa as well, even though, like I say, Palace has proven themselves to be a good, solid team to play against. So I am going with Leicester City as my dud of the week because I feel like, man, this is a typical Brandon Rodgers syndrome, right? If you're a regular of our YouTube channel and watch the morning coffee with American Scouser, Mecca gets a record number of Brandon Rodgers bashings, and we were at 11, I think, last week. Actually, might have even hit 12 in a week. And I think that's the thing. It's just like this team is leaking in goals and plays almost every game with the lackadaisical attitude of like a preseason game where the score doesn't matter. Let's play pretty. Let's see what happens. Kind of like attacking. I think there are a lot of players over there who maybe their minds are not in it, and maybe the end of the month will help that get that team kind of like back to where it should be. So many players rumored to be leaving and going here and not liking that, extensions and things like that. Maybe once the 31st comes and goes, it would be like, okay, I guess we're here, let's get back to work. But losing at home to Southampton, that should be, when we did our preseason previews, we did not rank Southampton very high, and Leicester City with only 1 point to show for their season so far, and that was giving up a lead to Brentford at home. So it's just not looking good for that team right now. Brendan Rodgers, who's already kind of like overseen a couple of collapses of this team. I know they have very loyal owners there and good owners that kind of like pride themselves on that loyalty. But I don't know how much longer they can kind of like watch this unfold, because their schedule now gets really tough. They play Chelsea, then they play United, then they go to Brighton, and then they go to Villa. I guess that would be the last. That would be like a nice change of pace for them. But then they play Tottenham. So it's a very tough stretch, and you could see them going with 0 points, except maybe that Villa game. So it's going to be interesting to see how they turn out. But their performance this week made me pick them as dud of the week.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I do agree with you. The owners are very loyal, but I get a kick out of that when people say that to me, like, "Oh, the Leicester, they're so loyal. They're the most loyal owners. This guy won the FA Cup. They can't get rid of him." Claudio Ranieri made the greatest win in the history of professional sports, and they blew him out by Thanksgiving the following year. So I do think that for all that loyalty, Brendan Rodgers is going to have to watch that seat because they might have been your dud of the week. He could end up being the EPL's, dud of the first half from a manager standpoint because I don't know if they turn it around. And I think you're right. I think Leicester's in some trouble.
So the shocker of the week, quite the week we had actually. There were several scores. We were looking ahead to like the fixtures for next week, Gally, and trying to pick a match of the week. It did not look like there was as many competitive matches, but that's the beauty of the Premier League. Things that looked like easy deals on paper do not always turn out to be so. What was your shocker of the week this week?
I think it would be easy to say United over Liverpool 2-1, or even, City having to claw back from 3-1 down at St. James Park and with that draw to Newcastle. But for me, it's going to be, it's going to be the result at Ellen Road. It's going to be Leeds United 3-0 over Chelsea. I think anytime you take on a big time rival, and it's been a long time since Leeds was around, but there was a period where everyone's biggest rivals was Leeds United because they were just good, dirty, and their supporters were just brutally honest and, well, as some would say, dirty. Dirty Leeds, you dirty, dirty Leeds. But Chelsea hadn't lost a league match there since 2002. So to get your bitter rival on your home pitch, to not just beat them, but to basically take their pants down and spank them. Aronson, Aronson's effort and work rate on the first goal, closing Mendy down for the howler. And it's an absolute calamitous mistake by the keeper. Can't happen. It's one more reason why you shouldn't teach keepers they have to play it out from the back, because once he got caught on the ball and realized I can't take this touch. Oh, I took this touch. The next thought in his mind was, I'm now going to take the outfield player on in my own 6-yard box and dribble past him. So like he compounded the mistake with more mistakes. But to be fair, the Chelsea players, if you watch it, none of them move. None of them do anything to give him a place to pass the ball once he's getting closed down by Aronson. So it was just poor preparation. But take nothing away from Leeds. I think Jesse Marsch is trying his hardest to put his own imprint on the side. They're playing to his, level, 2 wins and a draw, and they had a 2-0 lead and they kind of squandered that one away, or they could have 3 for 3 on the spin. And I just think to do it to Chelsea is one thing, but to do it in the manner in which they did, by outrunning them, outworking them, and just tactically slapping them around the pitch. I thought it was really, really big. And I think for a side like Leeds, that was by far, for me, the most shocking of all results. Not that they won, the manner in which that they won.
Yeah, because they definitely looked more up to it. I mean, throughout the game, as you were watching, you could just tell the pace, the reaction time, and everything. It looked like Chelsea had just played a game. This was their second game, and Leeds was just like starting fresh. Let's go back to the goalie thing, because here's what I do not understand. When a goalie makes, I mean, we all know it's the new football, soccer, what do you want to call it, building from the back, including the goalie. And obviously it makes sense with the press, add that extra number. So goalies with, who are good with the ball on their feet are obviously a hotter commodity now. And I understand the reasons and the why. And in teams like Liverpool, like City, those come into play a lot, and they might not get, which as Ellison has gotten goals and assists, mind you, but even if it doesn't go on the score sheet as a goal and assist, some of the passing they do and the way they help break that press creates stuff up top. What I do not get is when they get into that trouble, I mean, as a defender, there are times where you're in deep shit. Like you're in your corner and you're stuck. You got the pressure and you feel the other guy coming from the other side. And I've always been told, and I'm sure any defender has been told, if you can boot it away, you boot it away. If you can't boot away, just freaking concede the throw in. Get settled in and defend. Obviously you screwed up you did something, a bad touch or something put you in that situation. But don't make it worse by trying to get out of it and get past the guy. You kind of play always the safe route. Why is it that is it just overconfidence, you think, that the goalies feel like he did there? Oh shit, well, let me try something fancy over here, because he could have, even after that bad touch, he could just freaking toe poke it to a corner kick. I mean, you're better off considering a corner kick than trying to create a situation where nobody can help you. You're on an island, the closest defender is miles away. So if you can't make it happen, kind of like he didn't, you're almost definitely going to get scored on because there's nobody to help you there. Is it just overconfidence?
I think it is overconfidence. I think it's also the fact that they are much more less frequently put under that situation in that duress than, say, a center back is down at the corner. And I just think mentally a center back can just get their brain equipped to, I don't have it here, kick it out for a corner, kick it out for a throw in, worst case, even give away a corner, right? He could have literally just stepped on top of the football and dragged it backwards out of bounds for a corner kick as soon as he saw Aronson was closing him down. And
the quarterback drop of 15 yards to kill time, like take a safety.
I know it sounds stupid. He could have. I mean, it sounds dumb, but he could have just dribbled the thing out of bounds. I mean, he could have muscled Aronson off, to be honest, and just kicked it out for a throw in if he really wanted to. He got cute. He got caught. And to Aronson's credit, he not only pressed. He didn't just press to be a nuisance. He got close and realized, like, I can get the ball off him, and then had the composure to even keep it on his foot and take the dribble. So, because at one point I thought he was going to try the tough angled shot, and I was like, if you miss this, like this will be even worse, kid. And he didn't. He did like the actual composed thing, which is take the dribble to the middle of the box, just kind of sidestep it in, and just turn around and probably send a thank you note to Mendy for delivering your first Premier League goal. But it wasn't just that moment from Aronson. He created 2 or 3 other opportunities before that. He created the space for the first goal. He delivered the set piece that Rodrigo he got fouled for Harrison to deliver the beautiful set piece on Rodrigo's header. Yeah. I mean, and then the second or the third goal was just classic Leeds. Build up, lots of intricate play, winning the ball in midfield, and then, Harrison being in the right place, Chelsea trying to play offside traps because they're lazy. Then you fix in Koulibaly getting the ridiculous yellow early and then an even dumber yellow late for the same thing twice. And to me, it does not take away that he's a class defender. It takes away that there are going to be a lot of times that his pace lets him down in the Premier League. And I think you can have one center back that you're carrying on age and guile in Silva playing in the middle of a 3. Yeah. I don't think you can have 2 center backs that are both, man mountains and up there in years and not fleet of foot. And I think at times Koulibaly and Thiago Silva are going to struggle, especially if Tuchel keeps going to a back 4 because they can't score.
I think that's, we were talking on the show earlier about Varane, for example. I think part of it is how the center back, as they age, adjust to them losing that speed. And if they can adjust their game, and I don't see that from Koulibaly. I mean, we saw this, when we matched up with him in the Champions League as well, that he struggles with the pace. And I get the feeling that Thiago Silva over time has gotten slower and slower, but he knows how to play with that speed and he can adjust his positioning. It's going to be interesting to see if Koulibaly can, because, I mean, they were blatant yank downs on both of them. You could not argue with either one. And it wasn't even like, oh, it wasn't even subtle. It was just like, oh, here you go, you're down. And it was just like, I mean, what do you expect? I know they're kind of, and that's what I was going to ask you. Does that say to us more about Leeds or Chelsea this game? I mean, Chelsea is going to a relatively, and I know we say this, but then nothing is a given. But they play Leicester at home now. Then they go to Southampton, then West Ham, then Fulham. Does this game, like the shocking result, or more the manner, like you were saying, does it say more about Leeds or does it say more about Chelsea?
I think what it tells us about Leeds is that they are figuring out the identity that their manager wants them to play in. And if he can keep these guys fit, they can play his style. And I think like the Tyler Adams kid is playing much better than I thought he would right away here in the Premier League. I think he's really, it's like a duck to water with him and the Raka kid from Bayern Munich. They seem like they're a very good two-man pivot. And I think it's just what the Jesse Marsh kind of system requires, that engine room, hardworking guys.
Yeah.
I think they're going to give, for as long as they can play this way, I think they're in a much, much better place under Marsh than under Bielsa. And I think there's some happy times coming. I'm not saying they're making Champions League, but I don't think they'll be in a relegation battle if they can stay this fit and play like this. I think with Chelsea, it's going to be more of this, because I think there is real issue in not the depth, because they have depth all over the pitch. I think there's a real issue with the pieces they have and whether or not they make each other better. I don't know that Mount and Havertz and Sterling is ever going to work as a front three, but I know they're the most talented front three players they have. I think that Conor Gallagher looked a shell of the Crystal Palace player in his first ever start in the Premier League for Chelsea this weekend. I thought he was terrible against Leeds, and he was playing deeper, and that doesn't make any sense. Tuchel's still starting Jorginho. Conte can't stay fit. The most attack-minded player is probably Reece James on the entire team, and he's playing him at right center back, not even right wing back, so he can play Ruben Loftus-Cheek, his most powerful midfielder, as a wing back. And then the Pulisic argument, you put him in with 15 minutes to go, and then you always talk about how he has to do more when he gets on the pitch to earn more minutes, but he gets 10 to 12 minutes every time. Then when they talk about him leaving, the manager says he's important to me and I want him here. He just doesn't seem like he's connected to his players. You buy Cucurella, yet Chilwell was arguably your best left-sided attacker all last season. They just seem like they have no real rhyme or reason, and nothing seems to be working. And in the final third, they look like they're a bottom half team. And they're too big a club to struggle like this. Maybe they'll buy 5 more players by the end of the window and it'll all be different. But if they don't, they're the one that's on the outside looking in for me. The Arsenals, the Tottenhams, even the Uniteds. I think Chelsea's the one that has the chance to make the fall.
Yeah, it's shocking that we're saying that, really, but it is very likely. And I talked about this earlier in the show about Leicester. I get the same sense with Chelsea too. I think that's one of those teams that's going to have a lot more peaceful mind once this window closes, because there are way too many question marks with some of their players leaving, who's going to come in. And they did make some moves, like the Cucurella move. And this is where, you can spend a lot of money. I know Pep always gets a lot of smack for, spending, gazillion dollars on like backs and like different positions and stuff. But you got to be able to still spend guys that's going to fit your system, and you have a plan for them. I don't know what the plan with Cucurella was. And I don't know if the plan was to make him a starter. I don't know how fair that was on Chilwell. I know he has not been reliable with injuries, but like you're saying, when healthy, he was there. And I know, like, when they were in the race, when Chilwell got injured, and I know as Liverpool fans, we were like, well, that's going to really hurt them. And I don't think you spend that much money on Cucurella to be just in case Chilwell gets hurt again. So there are a lot of question marks at Chelsea, and I think that's going to be interesting to see how these next. I mean, like I say, the fixture looks like it's easier on paper. But it's going to be interesting to see what results they pull out of those games. Because don't forget that, the 3 points they got was a last minute goal, right? I mean, it was like, the last breath goal that they won. So it's not like they have been impressive throughout. And obviously they got exposed and spanked, as you would say, this week.
Actually, it was even worse. It wasn't a last second goal. It was the stoppage time penalty against Everton in the first half, and
That's
they
right.
still only won that thing 1-0 by creating nothing and had 0 shots on goal, even with a 1-goal lead against a toothless Everton. And then they drew with Spurs, which, to
Yeah,
be fair to them, they played well against
they
Spurs
did.
and
They
they
did.
deserved the 3 points, but they couldn't finish the job. And then you lose that way to your bitter rivals. And I know Tuchel said after the match, I don't want to hear that that they ran more than us. I don't want to hear that they worked harder than us. It had nothing to do with attitude. It had everything to do with attitude. And anyone who thinks that some of his players didn't see the way he acted against Tottenham, and then having that whole drama and the fact that he has a suspension coming for the comments he made about Anthony Taylor, it's not going well for Thomas Tuchel. And this is usually when Thomas Tuchel starts to lose his way with his club, is right about the same time he loses the way with the dressing room at said club. And maybe that's not the case here, and everybody loves him at Chelsea and it'll all work out. But you got some big personalities in there like Sterling and Mount and Jorginho. And I just I can't imagine that they are enjoying this version of Thomas Tuchel.
And I think it's one of those, it goes back to showing, I think, mentality. When you kind of do not do much against an Everton team, the showing you have against Leeds, but then when you play a rival at home, you're a totally different team. It almost feels like everybody's a bit more focused. That's what kind of tells me this is going to be a team that definitely benefits from seeing 9-1 on the calendar and moving on, knowing this is what we got and this is what we're rolling with, kind of a deal. My shocker of the week, and I think this kind of like goes both ways. You made him your dud, but the West Ham Brighton game. I really thought West Ham, I mean, we all did, right? You, me, and Bickler kind of like picked them to be one of the top teams again. They had so much potential. They added some important pieces on top of what they had without really losing much. And to see them where they're at in the standings, and more than that, the way they're playing, and that's why I think it's twofold that was shocking. I'm also very impressed with how Brighton has played, and they actually lost some key players. But despite that, their brand of football is still there, and it is beautifully beautiful to watch. And I think they have replaced. He came in later in the game, and you could already tell that Estupinian from Villarreal is going to be the ideal replacement for Cucurella, and Brighton is going to be a solid team. Do you think Brighton can actually end up the team that we thought West Ham was going to be?
I do. And actually, if you remember when we did our previews, I actually said, I was shocked to look and see that Brighton finished ninth last year. And that I said if Brighton could find a way to get 15 to 20 goals total from all strikers, that I thought Brighton had a chance to fight and be that team that crashed the European places or be up there in the table. If there is a team making a jump, in my opinion, it is Brighton. They have the best manager outside of the top six. They have some of the best players. They by far have the best transfer and recruiting team out there. Can we all admit this? This is a team that bought this Caicedo guy for $3 million, and Liverpool and United are talking 40 million purchases. They paid 12 million to Getafe for Cucurella. They sold him for 60 1 year later. They got Basuma for less than 2 million, sold him to Spurs for 40. I mean, let's just say this. They profited off Neil Mopai, people.
Yeah.
Profited off Neil Mopai. Okay? Like, that's some quality. I mean, like, and it's not even that. They plucked the young 18-year-old Ecuadorian striker that they have that's in there now that they think is going to be a real star eventually. They got the kid from Germany. I really like what they do. McAllister. They got Gross from, Bayern Leverkusen, I think it was, or Hertha Berlin, wherever it was that they bought Pascal Gross when they bought him out of the Bundesliga. They have a legit transfer committee. They have a great stadium. I mean, supporters. It's all working. And, I think 2 years ago, it looked like they might go down. I think they finished 1 or 2 spots outside of the relegation zone, and I was worried for them. I think Brighton is kind of on that Bournemouth trend that they were on for a while. I think Brighton's a side that has established themselves that, like, Brighton Hove Albion is now a Premier League side.
Yes,
And I think
and
they
that's what
be
I
really
think.
proud of that.
And I think that was probably, like I said, that's why I feel like the shocker was 2-way. I did not expect Brighton to be, I mean, that dominant over West Ham. And you can see West Ham is in real trouble. And like Bowen is nowhere near what he was. Antonio, you were talking about him when we were talking about the dud of the week for this week. Probably will lose a spot soon at this rate. He's not bringing much. And I think what we're seeing with West Ham is that double pivot they had with Souček and Rice is very impressive and plays well and works well when they're protecting a lead or when the game is tight and it's a tight game, because they can win those balls, recirculate him, get it to Bowen, get it to the forwards. But when they're playing from behind and when they're chasing a game, it does not work as well because they're more initially defense first kind of minds, and obviously Souček makes those runs into the box all the time. But I mean, and he missed some golden opportunities too. I mean, over the last like the beginning of the season, he's missed some ridiculous ones. I mean, I guess is you could kind of do the devil's advocate thing. Is like you got to be there. He's making those runs. Eventually, they're going to go in, but that has to mess with your confidence when. I mean, wide open headers right in front of goal, just like crazy things happening. But it is the perfect storm, I guess, in some ways for West Ham in that sense. I think we're kind of seeing that they should probably maybe they watched our preseason previews and got way ahead of themselves and kind of started playing like a top team. I think they play better when they play safety first and then get the ball. And obviously, you do need an informed Antonio and Bowen to be able to creating that stuff up top for you, to be able to kind of like capitalize on that possession you're getting.
And I think that's the other thing too. I think we've seen Lanzini and Fornals and Ben Rama. They have flashes, but they don't totally get the job done. I really like the Maxwell Cornet kid that they purchased from Burnley. I'd like to see him start on the right-hand side, start the big Italian striker, and then play Bowen out on the wing, and then maybe play with maybe you play with Ben Rama in the 10 hole behind the striker, and literally have Antonio be your sub to come off the bench and give you power and run at a slow, tiring defensive core. Maybe they're the type of team that goes and gets the one-trick pony and buys Adama Traore and lines him up and lets him be the Bowen 10-minute sub at the end of matches. Like, they feel to me like they still need a little bit more in the attack. And I just think that we've talked about Moyes and his stubbornness to rotate. And I just feel like, they went into this season with Kurt Zuma and Craig Dawson at center back. And I know they bought the big center back from France and then he got hurt. And then they bought the other kid from Germany and he picks up didn't he get sent off? Or no, he gives a penalty away in his first 10 minutes. I mean, it's tough for him right now. Sounds like Emerson Palmieri is coming in from Chelsea, the left back. So maybe that adds a little bit of attacking prowess for them. But, I think it's going to take a little bit right now. I think they're going to need some work. They're in some trouble.
We almost debated making the Villa West Ham game the match of the week for week 4. That is going to be an interesting one to see which direction those teams are heading in. And it's a key game for West Ham, especially, I think, because then they have Tottenham, Chelsea, Newcastle. So entering a tough stretch, and you do not once again, we can see them getting 0 from those games. So that's a key game. Villa's schedule is pretty tough moving forward the next 2-3 weeks too. So that will be an interesting game to keep an eye on and see if Gerrard can get stuff straightened out at Villa or if Moyes gets stuff fixed at West Ham first. But that is a tough battle coming up on game week 4.
I'd want to be out of the relegation zone if I were David Moyes before that stretch starts to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of probably so. If you had to pick one, if I said Moyes or Gerrard in like another 4 weeks, like week 8, they're like towards that bottom over there. Who's at more risk, you think?
I think Villa's at more risk. One, because I think one manager is more equipped to deal with getting out of it, and the other is still figuring things out. And I think Villa has real problems in their balance. And I think West Ham doesn't. They need to fix their problems, but if they do fix it, they know they can play within themselves. I don't think Villa's proven to anyone yet that this collection of players can actually succeed going forward.
That's fair. We had already a lot of hate mail coming from Villa fans, so there'll be more of it coming. But hey, I hate to be the guy that we said we told you so. And we didn't. I don't think we expected as big of a problems. We kind of like were more actually concerned about is Gerrard going to be able to get everybody kind of like refocused after the up and down they had last year, and they have not done so yet. But it is really early goings in the season. Heck, they can come back to us and say, look at Liverpool, they only have 2 points. So it's way too early in the season, but definitely warning signs for both teams so far. Our match next week, the match of the week will be City against Palace. Should be an interesting matchup with City losing points against Newcastle, coming back home, playing Palace, who actually took 5 points away from them last year and seem to be a lot more established and playing good football right now. So we will make that our match of the week. Have a great week, everyone. See you guys next week.